believe in the private ownership of the means of production?
No, not at all.
Okay, so do you believe in differential wages?
It depends on the way the wage system is implemented, but I don't
believe-
fundamentally
Would you
have a
believe-
problem.
Wait,
Do
I
you
have a question
believe-
for the man with the soothing voice. Would it be all right for you then to organize wages separately, and you know, you have a guy only earning top dollar, and another guy that earns a little less, and another guy that earns a little less?
Well, I
As
think
long as the
that's what
bottom
string theory was
salary
asking, right?
provides a certain level
That is
of-
exactly what I just asked. I don't understand why you literally reiterated
Because I
the
don't like
question.
your voice. And
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
It's not
so-
personal.
That's fine. I don't care.
It is.
So
You know,
just so I understand.
String theory actually sounds like a guy I was friends with in high school, so I actually have kind of like a sentimental attachment to the voice. Anyway, it
If
depends
I
on
were
how
to
the wage
summarize it
system.
by saying from each according to their ability, to each according to their
each according
means,
to their needs.
you'd be on that?
I am fine with an asymmetrical distribution of labor credit, whether that be money or vouchers or T-shirts, but it needs to be implemented in a way that exists to fairly and equitably distribute resources as they are needed,
And
not
who
because
do
somebody
you-
happened to
who
get
is
the
your
land first.
goal?
Can
Who
I add
is
my
your
2 cents?
goal implementer?
Well, it's not that. No, guys, this is an interesting line of question. I don't want.
No, I'm following. I understand what he's trying to say.
Who is
Right,
your
He's drawing
implementer?
parallels. He's drawing
There-
parallels, yeah.
When you ask questions like that, what you're getting to is the practicalities of whatever future form of government
No.
might come about
No,
in
no, no.
society.
Look,
No, but
a communist would say the government implements.
well, no. Okay, hold on, please. Communism is hypothetically a stateless society. So what you're not talking about is a state or a government. You're talking about a central planning committee.
Yes.
And what I think it all comes down to really is committees, and the level of committee, how wide their reach is one of the larger dictating forces as to what kind of leftist society you're going about.
Okay.
A planning committee ideally would be organized democratically and with the best interests of the workers in mind. I think that if we're talking about wage differentiation, it should be done at a local level with superseding cabinets oriented towards maintaining equitability and fairness on the part of that distribution.
I have a question.
Capitalism
Well, no,
has
wait.
been the greatest driver of prosperity in the world
Look,
ever.
Can put a pin in that.
Somewhat,
We can.
but here's the thing.
You could also
I'm
argue that
6
it's
foot
been
3, right? And I'm gonna suck my dick here a little bit, but
Please do.
I have man boobs and I'm fat. Right?
Nice.
I could go
Is
to the
there?
gym. I could work out. I just don't, because fuck it.
Agreed.
I'm studying so that I can become a lawyer. You know, an environmental lawyer means I'm going into medicine as well
Nice.
to work for Coca-Cola. Here's the beautiful thing.
Coca-Cola.
Contradiction.
No,
Sorry, go
you see, a lot of companies employ environmental advocates. That way, so they can know how far they can go before the law actually goes to fuck them in the ass.
That's
you
the
control them from
negative.
killing people.
I feel like that. Well, now I feel like that's a negative part of capitalism, right there. Is
I'd like to come out and make it known that I am anti-Coca-Cola.
I am as well. But the
Here's
reason
the beautiful thing. I don't care about poor black people, or poor people, or anyone that isn't me, or in my direct family. So basically, if you don't suck my dick, I don't care about you.
All
People like
right.
me
Okay,
exist,
then you.
right?
Well, do you?
And I
Do
am
you
So-
consider yourself
smart.
you
So-
consider yourself smart? Do you consider yourself a good person? Because you're.
I'm gonna be honest
Yes.
with you. I don't think there are any good people out
So,
there, and even
we
if
have
there were,
we have a
they're
right.
not rich.
Why? I guess we do have a right libertarian here,
Wait,
but
does,
what's
does
the
anyone
point?
here like Rick and Morty? Haha, Pickle Rick. Everyone know that?
I
Okay.
do, but
That was
the
a really
reason
good
is
episode,
that
though.
But why are we?
people that are smart generally don't tend to be altruistic.
That's not true.
False.
That's
I mean,
false.
yeah.
Absolutely
Literally-
false.
Extremely
Warren
false.
Buffett is a great example.
Elon
Literally
Musk,
just made
Tim
that up.
Cook.
No,
Alright, well,
you can't. You literally
don't
just
count
made
as an
that up.
example.
Wait. You made a strong statement of fact that people who are
Yeah.
smart are typically not altruistic. you have any source for that strong statement of fact you made, or did you just make it up?
Sources
No,
in
I do not have
27.
any sources for my facts. But
All right, look, no,
Not
the mere
facts.
existence of a person like me does show that there will be people to abuse the system, and there will be people that will perpetuate the system, even if they understand it's a fucking flawed system, it's a horrible system. They'll do it just because they want the ability to grow fat. They want to have more than the other guy. Hell, I don't like money. I like the idea of having more money than the other guy. You know?
the idea.
Why? That's
All right, well,
that's
the
not
idea of
beneficial.
leftism and its goal is mostly to minimize that to the greatest extent. At least, am I getting that correct, Irish?
I'm
Like, you want to
completely
minimize.
on board with
Somewhat,
that.
yeah.
I-
But like, the thing is, that goes against the basic human instinct.
All right, okay. I gotta
But is that your
wait. Hold on.
original evidence,
Human
or-
nature me. Okay, I gotta take this one. All right. I do agree that there is a fundamental aspect of self-preservation that is imbued in all sentient beings, and in this society, self-preservation manifests as a self-interest, largely in economic terms. However, I do not think there is any substantial avopsych evidence and no anthropological evidence to suggest that our survival or success as a species has been propagated on self-interest. It has always been propagated on communal interest.
It's not the necessity. It's just that I want to.
But is that
You
only
can't-
because the society you grew up in perpetuates those ideas?
Look,
And
if you want to live in a Machiavellian world where everyone's out for themselves, then you have an honest to God right to do that, even in a leftist society. I don't think that we should live in a world, I don't think there should be a world where self-interested people, or just selfish assholes, like you seem to be claiming to be, you know,
Yes.
I don't think that we should live in a world where those people are dragged out into the street and shot, or a world where they're forced to work their cut. I do, however, think the world is going to be crueler to you, and I think that's fair.
Okay, so then I have a question. What happens if I succeed?
If you what?
Okay, I got a pretty solid thing going on here.
Uh-huh.
Just finish the years of college. My uncle's a rich man. He owns a business. He passes it shit to me. It's basically a fucking oligarchical system. And here's the fucking problem. There are a lot of rich families that pay students, get them through college, get into medicine, get into whatever the fuck they want to, just by paying a small contribution.
That's
This-
not how it works.
Dude,
Well,
go register.
If you have
for
a
fucking
parent
medical
who
college,
donates
right?
a lot to a college, you can get some
Yeah.
pretty dumb fuck people.
It's
You
not
get
a
people in
small donate. It's not a small donation to get your kid into a
A small,
That's
some,
why they're only rich people. Have you done an interview for a medical college? One of the first questions I got asked is, can your parents do a sizable donation in order to
No,
help
it
us out?
wasn't. That's just not true.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
not, at least not in the United States. That wouldn't happen.
Dude,
Wait, but I think
I
okay,
like
but I
legitimate
think
to a bunch of websites of
he's-
doctors explaining how their interviews
he's
went.
making. But
Now,
I think what's important. Okay, guys, let's not be nitpicky here.
decline
What
in society unless you have a certain level of selfishness. And if you do
the
have a certain level of selfishness, then that just completely goes against everything you want society to be like.
Well, we
Okay,
can look at societies like Japan that are
Okay,
way
but-
less selfish.
but 2 points really quickly, because I understand what you're saying, and I think that the point that he's making is more important than the details he's giving to elaborate his relationship to that point. And the things are this: A, I do believe, and call me an idealist, I do believe that people personally benefit from an altruistic lifestyle, not in some hippy-dippy karmic sort of way, but because fundamentally our emotional centers reward us for behavior that
Yes.
endears us to the people around us. Now,
Wait,
now
what's-
is everyone now? There are happy, selfish people out there, okay? That like
What-
lots of them. There are happy sociopaths, but I think that on
What's an
average,
emotional center? Like, what's that exactly?
well, we have emotions. Like, isn't the goal? Why do we strive? What do we strive for if not to secure our own
Sorry,
happiness?
why did we get entirely off the point of leftism versus capital socialism
It did get
by right libertarian showing up and being like, I'm a right libertarian?
Okay, but like the point he's trying to go down on is something that's sort of important to deal with in this context. Like it's a subtopic,
Yeah.
not a deviation from the topic.
I do think there's validity in the worth of discussing this. I don't, like, there's nothing I can say to be like, go forth, yon child, and walk the true path, for all others will stray thy from mine light. There's no way to argue ethical responsibility for those who just aren't interested. But I think, and maybe people don't agree with this, but I think that we all benefit from that. We benefit from being good to ourselves and to those around us. I know for a fact that I am more happy, personally, me, and I am a selfish person. I'm autistic. I'm throwing that one out there to Destiny's chat.
No, I got diagnosed with autism as well.
It's surprisingly common. I am autistic. It does affect my life in some ways. Thankfully, not to a significant degree. I'm not like hyper autistic or whatever, but it does manifest itself to some degree in a level of selfishness on my end. And I know for a fact that I am happier when I overcome the urge to act only in my own self-interest and do kind things for others. It's not a one-size-fits-all cap, but I do think that it benefits us on a fundamental level to be good to one another. And I think a society that is reflective of that principle is going to be one that is more successful in the long run than one that encourages ruthlessness or spite or fervent competition. Now, is competition necessarily a bad thing? No. Ambitious people should rise to the top because that's where they're happy. It's just important that they do so with an interest in the public good, because that makes their ambition noble. Maybe I got a bit off topic.
As
no,
why
you're on topic, but like, my
we
problem
get it.
is,
You're a right libertarian. I think we all understand that at this point.
Though, and I think
his point is
the solution to right libertarianism is not to debate with them about right libertarianism, but rather to set up structures whereby their self-interest is unable to destroy society. It's not hard.
But here's the problem.
I don't disagree with that.
We're not going to convince you not to be selfish. We're just going to prevent your selfishism from
selfishness.
The system.
The thing is, I don't think you can realistically do that. My end goal isn't just to be selfish.
Tax the shit out of you, dude.
My end goal is to be better than other people.
No, I can tax the shit out of you.
But you can you can be better than people and also be good to them.
What the fuck is wrong with you? No, you can't.
Yes,
you can.
Yes, you can.
If you're better than someone else, and you can't display that by having air of superiority when you talk, by having more respect from other people, by earning more than they do.
I don't think you force people to be
What the fuck is wrong with you? What are you even talking about?
Leftism doesn't mean we're a bunch of gray-faced drones who march to the same beat. There are still going to be ambitious people, people who succeed and fail, people who earn more respect than others, losers, winners. It's just going to take place in a system that ethically distributes value. Not based on merit, even, but based on reasonable need.
Or based on merit, depending on where you...
Yeah, depending on the circumstances. It's complicated, but you can be ambitious and succeed. You can be in a leftist society and you have a friend, and your friend is like, hey, we live in a leftist society, so we don't need to work because we'll starve otherwise. That was a capitalism thing. I think I'm just gonna smoke weed and be a garbage man. And you know what? The world needs fucking garbage men, as does it need its stoners, because they make good comedies. But you want to be a fucking surgeon, so you go to the med school, and you go to the grad school, and you do all the shit. You go to the fucking local Union's hospital, and you work so hard there that you end up running it. But rather than run it, you're not done. You decide to transfer and become head surgeon at one of the most prestigious and busy hospitals in the state. And then, once you're there, you don't stop. And your ascension to glory earns you respect from others, and in a very tangible way, you are better than those people.
But I don't know why.
Wait, are you that guy who's really obsessed with defeating his father or something? It sounds really familiar.
The amount of time that's been wasted on us saying, sure, you can make however much money you want to make, we'll tax it.
This is an important point to elaborate on.
Yeah, he can.
And Irish is doing it properly.
To your heart's content, people are just going to be able to avoid those.
I'm just saying that there's room for glory in all societies. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we got that. But faster, too much. You're letting the right libertarian dominate the conversation for some reason.
We're letting you dominate it, apparently.
He's not, and you're not. Irish has been speaking for 80% of this conversation.
Yeah,
he's been making very good and valid.
Consistently distracted by the right libertarian.
No.
I'm
not
only
a right
human.
libertarian.
He's
I'm
been
just
making a lot more
asshole.
progress.
Just being honest here. I'm just a complete asshole.
Okay.
Oh, you are that guy.
No,
You're the
no,
guy.
no,
Hold on.
see,
This is the guy
no.
who's obsessed with defeating his dad.
Wait, me?
Blush.
Not you. The
No,
guy, the
right
right
libertarian.
libertarian.
Okay, because I like my dad. I don't want any
But
rumors.
let's just not get distracted by him saying that we can't tax him. Like, who cares? We can.
Quick question.
Okay.
That's not the point
quick
that's
question.
being made, string theory. We're not talking about taxing him. We're talking about the specific amount of how
Yeah,
much success.
We're also
can
talking.
those-
We're also.
can
He's
those
also
selfish
making
people
arguments
make?
about people with those kinds of attitudes, right? Because
Right,
you know
but the
those
point
people are
is-
gonna come
the
up. We're
point
gonna
is-
have to address them.
Right,
String
but they
theory.
get
Your answer
addressed.
is fundamentally unsatisfying to the nature of the question.
Yes.
What do you believe the question is then?
Can we just talk about dick size? Like, all of us whip it out.
Right.
I've got
Anything but
7.3 inches.
So
I've
his
got
argument is that your
a can
altruistic
of,
society.
Monster Energy.
His argument is that your altruistic society will be destroyed by his selfishness, but
Very
it
much.
won't, because
It also
we can.
gets to the heart of the nature of ambition and competition, and wanting to like have prestige and be
Yes.
noteworthy and famous.
Yes.
But none of this detracts from the otherwise altruistic society. His whole story
Correct.
about how he's
That's
going
what
to
Irish has been trying to
his
explain.
whole-
Saying. That is the
But-
entire
Good
conversation
point.
that Irish Lottie has been making. That's the entire
Right.
point over the past 10 minutes that he's been saying is that it will, like, to succeed without hurting the general populace.
I just want it to be
However-
known that ambition isn't necessarily to the detriment of the larger society.
Yes.
Not only can
But
a
I'm not
leftist
a-
society tolerate selfishness, it can reward it under certain circumstances.
However, if his only goal is to make
Yes.
more than you,
Yeah.
in your socio-communist society that you were talking about, he will not be incentivized to work.
Well, okay, well then you get into the
Well, no,
topic
his
of like
incentives-
labor.
Yeah.
That's a super complicated topic, like reimbursement for labor, that no one in the left is 100% sure of. It's complicated. There's no super right answer.
My
Obviously,
problem isn't even that. My problem is how can I get people below me?
okay.
It's not
I'm
necessarily-
gonna answer this concisely, and then I'd like it if we could move on.
Absolutely.
People-
I want to retreat a bit.
If that's okay. If that's okay.
Yeah, I want to retreat a bit to a different point after. So.
Yeah. People can be below you only in the sense that your personal achievements can elevate you in the eyes of others. In terms of personal belongings, it is conceivable that your hard work might be rewarded with additional labor vouchers or with certain privileges regarding what kind of materials you have access to. That depends on the specifics of the society. However, if you want to be praised for selfishness, I don't think that society will reward you. One moment, I'm getting a call on my phone. I will be back in just a moment. I hope we can talk about something.
Quick question. A quick question for this libertarian guy. So what are you? What you were saying is that you prefer a system where there are like, strongly defined classes
There we
where
go.
you are richer.
We're the most bloodthirsty or
No,
the most
not
victorious,
necessarily.
correct?
What I want is to
Ouch.
be able to look outside and see that I live in a big house, that I changed my wife for a younger model, that my son is guaranteed to be as successful as I am, or more, that I don't have any competition in work. I don't have to stress myself over things just because.
But that's not real life now. Like that's not something
Not
that's achievable.
now, but considering where I'm going to school and everything. Yeah,
No.
it's-
I'm saying like in real life. Like that's that's what you aspire to. I'm not trying to be
That
mean,
doesn't-
but that's not
that
realistic.
doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Well,
you're
so
never
I
gonna be
know.
the number one in on the earth. That's an impossible feat. There's always
It's
gonna
not
be
the
someone
idea
better
of
than you.
being number one. It's the idea of being able to get there simply by just doing what's needed.
But there is no way to get there. There's no way to
There's
be
no
that
way to
like,
get.
singular
There's
person.
there's
There'll
no way
always
to.
be someone younger, faster, stronger, better. Someone's gonna come along.
Exactly. I'm chasing the idea that by just not caring about others and just being able to do the minimum needed,
Then you will never
Simply
succeed.
saying what people
Without
wanna hear.
ambition, you will not get to that level of success that you
Yeah.
the
have.
problem is
You
the
need
only
to have
ambition
ambition.
I have is to just be better than other people by seeing them getting fucked.
That's not enough. Then that's not enough.
I
You
mean,
can't
you,
That's all I have.
you do have to actually put in work for it, but it's conceivable
Yeah,
to
I
still,
put
in
in work.
even a leftist society, to have a good life and to get yourself better than others. It's just in a different mean.
He's saying he wants the visualization, which isn't possible in the leftist. So, like, the actual full visualization of people being beneath you in, like, a ghetto.
I have
Yeah,
Like,
You want an
okay.
actual class
I
system
love
where there are
that.
poor people
All right,
and
okay.
very rich people.
Okay, can we retreat to an initial point that I really wanted to make originally?
You
that I
sound
wanted to talk
enthusiastic.
about
What is it?
15 minutes ago. Originally, when you were speaking on the negatives of capitalism, which was like very start of this conversation, and you said how basically it's completely unsustainable, which I agree with. But you were very against the Sanders version of democratic socialism, which I think is inherently poor, being totally against that. Because in order for our society to successfully transition to your, like, not to be, like, over-exaggeratory.
No, you can call it a utopia.
Exactly. To your utopian society, there needs to be a possible transition. And Bernie's, like, obviously it's not like I'm jerking Bernie's dick off in my mouth, but
No,
I'm saying
I know exactly
that
what you mean.
transition, exactly. That
I didn't get
transition
an opportunity.
is necessary, in my opinion,
didn't-
to get to that leftist
Yeah.
society that we're looking at.
Earlier, I didn't really get an opportunity to explain the reasons why I was happy Bernie lost.
Yeah, but
And
that's
wanted
not
to
a
go over the,
that's not an unpopular mainstream, like, left wing, like, position.
Yeah, the main
Well,
reasons. Oh, sorry.
You just came off. I didn't think you initially meant this, and I still don't think you do. But it just came off as you wanted immediate transition from one to the other, which I thought was very unhealthy. At least in my opinion, that
would be a
not
lot
be
of
sustainable.
if that were the case.
It's not. That's not actually the reason. I know I come off kind of like an edgelord tanky, and that's not entirely without reason. I am a little bit too enthusiastic.
Because you're an edgelord tanky.
Well, I'm not actually a tanky. I hate what Stalin and Lenin did to the left, and Mao and shit. But the reasons why I'm happy Bernie lost are threefold. The first one being he's not an actual socialist. That's my edgelord leftist tanky only purists win kind of mentality. The other two reasons are more practical. The second reason is that Bernie Sanders is a legitimately good person. Everything in his history indicates that he's not like most politicians. He's not some piece of shit who's managed to suppress. Huh?
You wouldn't be able to do a good job in the system because it requires you to be corrupt somewhat.
Yes, I think that the presidency of the United States is like being the operator of a wheat thresher. No matter how well or poorly you do your job, no matter how evil or good you are, all a wheat thresher can do is thresh. And all a president can do is enact violence on minority groups, more or less, either directly or indirectly. I'm not joking when I say that. You can call me out on that.
Yeah,
No, I'm not calling you out on that.
I agree with you
problem-
mostly, but that seems a little questionable.
It's hyperbolic, but
my problem with that comes to, like, the inherent negativity of that statement, though.
I'm pretty negative on the government.
Oh no! I'm not saying being inherently negative on the government.
Oh yeah, I have a question though.
I'm saying
so,
being.
well,
let me finish.
Wait.
Oh yeah. So finish.
So I'm saying that being inherently negative against any sort of good, like, not obviously like you're against good, but any sort of change in the fundamental system of morality that the current state has, like, I feel like that's a very pessimistic view to have, is that nothing could have been done because he is too positive. I feel like there's a way there. I feel like where there's, like, I'm using some mumbo jumbo fucking talk, but where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, and there should be some sort of positive way to change these corrupted portions of.
I agree that there can be change within this system, though I don't personally find it sufficient in terms of, like, the goal. But the reason why I'm glad Bernie lost isn't because I have an idealistic stake in only like pure leftism should win. It's more because I think the pragmatic outcomes of the two are more beneficial if he had lost. What I think would have happened if he had won and then gone on to win the presidency, because that's the hypothetical I'm entertaining here, even if it hadn't happened, I think he would have. I'm one of those fucks, I'll say it. I think Bernie would have won.
Statistically, based on polls, he would have won. I think what was it, 10% more over
Sorry,
Hillary?
those polls were taken before any negative campaign ads were run against him.
But even if he had, that's what I'm working with here. If he had won, what I think would have happened he would have led a fairly successful and milquetoast presidency, noteworthy only for the amount of legislation he was unable to pass. The very first self-proclaimed socialist president, and nothing. Well,
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Self-proclaimed socialist president, and he would have been at best a less horrible than average president, and that's fine. However, I believe that in his loss, we may have sown the seeds of what could potentially be a much greater harvest in the future. It's absolutely 100% an unsubstantiated gamble. It's not like I've done the fucking numbers, but I do believe that now that he has lost, there is a deep seed of resentment in this country.
It's more important to put the idea of a perfect utopia out there and have it actually have a chance of spreading through the wider consciousness than having someone proclaim that idea, show himself, and then not perform up to the standards.
Exactly.
Yes.
It is better for him.
The initial statement I had made, like way back to start this entire conversation, where I ranted about why I think it was better. But yeah, I do totally agree with this. Go on. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
No, I completely agree with that 100%. That's the crux of it. He lives on now as an idea, a hope of what could have been. And in that form, I believe he is far more useful and beneficial than he would have been as a milquetoast, somewhat successful president. And I hope that his legacy, and I know I'm being
you're the first one here.
I hope that his legacy
someone else.
inspires a new wave of leftists.
That's
weak leftists, mind you. I'm a strong leftist. I've read the books. I've read Marx. I know all the memes. But you know what? If some fucking Berkeley students who never even read the goddamn Communist Manifesto want to call themselves socialists and say, yeah, Bernie, and if that leads them
it's called
to
Wild
positive
9.
change
It's a
in this
title
country,
for the
I'll take
PlayStation
that.
1.
I'd rather have
It's just like a
group
little
of uneducated,
platformer
good people
deal
than a very
with
small,
something of a visceral mechanic, where instead of jumping on guys' heads, you pick them up with like a little thing and you kind of slam them around. Put them on spikes, put them into grinders, all that.
Then can become the face of the movement without just becoming a disappointment.
Me, obviously.
The whole point is that the face of the movement may not have even been born yet. They may not even be in politics yet. Like the face of the movement
I do that.
To, start up.
Well, I do it this way because it just makes it more interesting in post for me, and plus we're talking in Discord, so it's it's better off
4, 8,
this
12
way.
years. It's just at the beginning of sprouting, and it'll be done 50 years down the line, or
okay.
If Bernie got his,
then now here comes the spicy question.
Holy shit!
Do we have enough time to allow for a seed to grow?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
We don't have any other option.
I think fascism.
Bernie would have won, though.
I think the biggest problem is that we all focus way too much on individual, singular events and timelines and movements forward.
If Bernie would have won, though, don't you think he could have got his $15 minimum wage meme, and that would have made companies pursue automation? And then at the end of that,
I don't think that's a meaningful goal, though.
Well, no, because
on the long term, that just means.
If the companies pursue automation because of that, then people are out of jobs, but that causes like a fire under the ass of the proletariat, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't the. And then that proletariat rises up and takes the means of production because they don't have jobs anymore.
Personally, it's more like saying, "Oh well, what if he went in and he nuked all of China?" I don't think it really matters what he would have done.
No,
because Bernie Sanders was pursuing like the $15 minimum.
Can I touch on this a bit?
Yeah.
All right. So, the $15 an hour wage was nowhere in its current state. It was nowhere near sustainable. Like there were solid ideas there, and that's what they were looking at. It was the ideas of better living for the poor. It wasn't specifically granted he was specifically looking for that, but the idea is implanted at the base of we need more sustainability for our lowest classes.
But my point is
not
that
specifically that.
My point is that the unsustainability would have caused communism to like come to fruition, because companies would have been forced to pursue automation because the cost of wages would be too high.
I mean, companies are already pursuing automation.
That's acceleration.
That would have made, yeah, exactly.
And that's a contentious subject in the leftist sphere. Some leftists, maybe myself included, who the fuck knows? Some leftists believe that if you worsen the material conditions of the proletariat, either directly or indirectly, presently, you will stoke the furnace and incite a revolution that will, in the end, lead to more good than would have occurred if you just let things peter through in a more centric, moderate way.
Yeah, like it's not a that sort of thing.
Late stage communism
like the game is just sort of there, just for the sake of to be somewhat visually interesting, but for the most part, it's just like a bunch of lefties discussing like strategy and theory and all that.
I want you to just really quickly, during people's pauses, please speak. Like it's a little frustrating right in the middle where you'll start an entire like 3 sentences while someone else is making a very important point. It's
like Mike makes right, so you have to show them.
And that's about it. So that's all I really wanted to say. Go ahead and make your point.
But yeah.
So
I fucking I like the memes there.
Your ideology to start, we're talking about a lot of people being unemployed to
That's only one way to get there. It's not
like that.
The only way to get there.
He was talking about he was making the point of an accelerated way of getting there.
I was just arguing that acceleration could have been impossible.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. At the end of it, it's not negative.
Well, at the end of it's not negative, but in the short run, it is.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't take long
for
the proletariat to realize
not yet.
that
Almost.
they can just take the means of production.
Ouch.
Like how long does it honestly take with the mass unemployment happening because of automation?
I lean a little bit towards accelerationism personally, but there are many instances in which it has turned out poorly in previous attempts at leftist governments, primarily in Central and South America. So historical precedent, I think, argues against accelerationism, but I think the material condition is different enough that it could possibly be a more viable approach. But it's a super contentious topic. Like, no one here has the answer. There are just different interpretations.
Yeah, it's interpretations and hypotheticals at that point. Where it's
tough.
Like, evidence would point to acceleration, but there's no evidence to specifically say, oh, but it'll definitely lead to communism, instead of just full-on automation and then greed and resulting in collapse of the lower class to the point where no one has a job, no one can get a job in communism, like leaving those people out to dry.
How do capitalists maintain that level of power, though?
I mean, that's a good question.
That would be like billions of people who, how could they ever fight against that?
Who would the government side with?
Am I saving this guy?
If it came to civil unrest, the rich or the poor? That's what the question boils down to.
That's a pretty easy question.
No, but to say, like, what?
If Bernie Sanders was at the helm, he would dissolve the government, right?
Well, that's one of the things, though. See, if that's one of the reasons why I'm glad he didn't win. Because as a president, he would still be an arm of the state. And if we started having labor riots during Bernie Sanders' presidency, it's not like he can say, police, let the riots happen. They're right. He can't do that. His only response, if he has to take his stance, is one against violence, is one against revolution. Because that is the role thrust upon him as the head of state.
I feel like, though, that was his whole message, was to avoid violence, which is why when extremely far left, like those black the quote-unquote, I
wouldn't say they're extremely far left at all.
I just meant the black I just mean the specific instance that I'm thinking of with the Black Lives Matter movement protesters who got up on his stand with no other reason other than to say that Bernie Sanders hates black people. Like, his entire thing was...
God, that was so fucked.
Can you...
Oh, it was rad.
I can't tell if you're memeing or not.
No, I'm not memeing. I legitimately liked it. I think it spoke mostly to Bernie's credit. I like the fact that he's level-headed enough to allow someone
oh my god, you just... Holy shit, dude. I thought you were siding with them taking the mic over him. Holy...
No,
I didn't think you meant the level-headedness.
No.
Okay,
Personally, I think that they were being a bit obnoxious, but
yes, that was my
their
point.
action did lead him to take a more defined stance on racism.
Non-violence. Well, on racism as well as non-violence, where he didn't have the security from the stage removed. That's why I'm thinking, had the Bernie presidency actually happened, I think he would have advocated heavily for non-violence, because in the current fragile state, and in the current fragile state previous to the election, I think he saw that.
Do you guys think if he would have won, we would have had? No, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, like, do you think if he would have won, like, the alt-right would have like ramped up like even like harder now that we're being ran by a lefty Jew?
Trump inspires. They are by definition cowards. They have to be, because their movement is propagated on insecurity. Stuff like that can only really fester when they're enabled by someone who has the appearance of having strength. I kind of butchered explaining that, but yeah, I think that Donald Trump,
like having a head, like the alt-right are essentially a body without a head.
They need to be led. That's the thing. They're weak people and they need to be led. Antifa don't need to be led. They move out because they want to protect their community. Whether you agree with their means or not, they're not being bossed around. They're not being motivated by some head speaker. They go out there because they have an individual interest in their personal ethical code. But alt-rightists need to be headed by a strong authority because they are weak people.
This is a feel argument, but I'm not a fan of Antifa just because of the potential for exploitation of their cause, which has kind of been demonstrated a little bit over like videos, because I'm more centric leaning than left leaning, with like a little bit. But my whole thing with Antifa is that the cause is valiant, and I don't disagree with it at its core, but the way that they carry themselves at points can be very counterproductive to what they're attempting to accomplish.
It's tough to strike a fine line. They do come off as a little bit thuggish, and I say that aware of all the loaded connotations that word comes with, including its racialized connotations. What is that?
Code word.
The noise. Oh, Lalichi, I think you got.
You
got some squishy expression.
I don't know.
Anyway, I'm aware of the fact
that's like his phone vibrating or something.
That's a dog with the word thugs, but they do to an extent. It's deliberate on their part. They're trying to strike fear that they are counter-protesting. Right. That is both a necessity and a downfall. I do think that ideally Antifa, as it exists, would instead be a radically organized group of educated and composed people who march together as one, their faces unmasked, and triumphantly stand in opposition to whatever cancer they're fighting against in their community, in a way that does not impose upon the public the belief that they are some disorganized rabble-rouser crowd. Whether or not that's possible, I don't know.
Yeah, I think in order to get something done like that, you gotta get the public on your side, right? Like if people,
it's very hard. Which the only way you can do that is with a leader, which is the inherent problem of Antifa, is that no one can fully get behind. Like a crowd cannot get behind them because there is no one there to lead. Like as you were saying initially, Irish, and then I'll let Super Devin make his point. Don't worry, I didn't forget about you, my dude. The whole thing that kind of collapses is Antifa at its core. I don't want to compare them to the alt-right because they're not fully comparable, but they are also. I feel like if they really wanted that cause to be made, they do need a head, like a leader, a head to their body, etc. Because without it, they just seem like an extremist group, which to outsiders, to centrics, like somewhat to myself, but more to other centrics who aren't as informed, and to rights, they seem like the left's version of the alt-right almost.
I think that there's a limit to the amount of concessions leftists can make to appeal to the centrist crowd, because at the end of the day, centrists do tend to side with the right. What's that phrase? If you scratch a liberal, a fascist bleeds. So for that reason, I am a little bit wary about making secessions to make them more appealing publicly. But at the same time, I can't deny the fact that there are consequences to the image that they currently present. during their public rallies.
I would argue that Antifa, or whatever,
Oh,
bad
okay,
words,
cool. This is
are more of a response of the left rather than a inherent group actively working towards something. I mean, they're a protest group to stop things rather than to instill things. So I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think they're an inherently good thing in that it's saying that there are groups of people willing to work for the left, but we need a counterpart with them to work with the system and to work forward towards a more peaceful solution outside of it.
We need flower anarchism as well, or like flower socialism, not just Antifa. Yeah.
But they're good in that they're showing that there are still a number of people willing to do something.
Right. It's the idea, not the execution, etc. I do want to let Super Devin make his point that he originally wanted to make, because I hate cutting people off and then they don't get to talk for the rest of it. Super Devin, what was your original either point or
portion? It was just a question. Do you think that there's a place for violence in the group? Do any of you think there's a place for violence in
a utopian society?
Not in a utopian society, but like on the path to get there.
On the path to get there, my inherent reaction is no, and this is where I initially disagreed.
I'm not advocating for violence. I'm just asking.
No, I know you're posing the question, and that's where me and Irish very, very have a heavy disagreement with, because when you brought up how advocated you were for violence against the right in light of the greater good, I very heavily agreed with Destiny when there was like 5 people on this channel where I was like, I'm really not certain on that. Like I really don't like the idea that we have to sort of like throw stones in glass houses. Like I feel very strongly that that's not the right way to go about it. I understand the idea that they are not inherently good people, and that there's the idea that there's no way they're going to change their mind, and there's no saving them, and there's no help for them, and it's already been decided.
I object a little bit to that iteration of my values.
Right, because I remember you specifically stated that you weren't being that bleak, but it was almost to that point.
No, like they're all people. The Antifa fascists, we are all, this sounds very hippie, we are all human beings, we all have the capacity to change and grow and better ourselves as people. And that is a notion that must be respected. However, we are presently on the verge of what could be a very real, very dangerous fascist uprising on a global scale. If that ever comes to pass, millions of people will die. There will be drafts, there will be ethnic purges, there will be deportations, there will be concentration camps. And when you are looking at a scope that broad, what matters is pragmatically deciding what needs to be done to prevent it. And unless the preventative measure is worse than that, and it's not, we're not going to commit any genocide, trust us. Unless the preventative measure is worse than the potential consequences of an action, violence is a worthwhile to consider.
So, I just disagree in the idea that we're on the verge of something. I just kind of disagree with that. When it comes to the original question, since you guys were talking for a while, I'm sorry, I want to speak a bit. I haven't spoken much. I personally am just very opposed on a philosophical level on almost any terms of violence that isn't to, as Irish said, prevent further violence. But I think at that point you have to be directly preventing. You can't have a hypothetical of the future where there's genocide and say, well, we have to kill a few people now, when I ideally would think that there has to be further.
But when would you have stopped the Nazi Republic?
Exactly.
Like when would you have gone, this is where we need to stop? Because wherever you're going to draw the line, it's too late. Look, guys, Hitler himself said it. He said this. This is a quote. I'm not going to go dig it up. You can type it and find it yourself. He said, the only way our movement could have been halted is if it had been crushed in its infancy. From the man himself. I don't think it's ethical to hurt people before they've hurt you. I do, however, think that there is no one universally applicable ethical principle, some base idea that we can rely on in all times.
This is the cost of the free society.
Slaughtering Nazis is the cost of... No. But yes.
He's saying the idea, like...
Saying the fact that once every so often, one random-ass country will have a fascist dictatorship is the cost of a free society.
No, it is not. Because opposing fascism is not antithetical to a free society. It is not.
Opposing fascism is not antithetical to a free society. Beating up random people in the streets for wanting to be fascists is...
It's also not isolated to one country. The last time fascism came, it came in a wave. It's in a wave again now.
Yeah, this is... Well, no.
Nobody who has personally experienced the horrors of fascism would say shit like that.
You've never personally experienced the horrors of fascism?
But would you go to, like, fucking post-war Germany and go, hey, so this sucked, but, you know... just gotta let things like this happen sometimes because otherwise we're the fascists. Do you think anyone is like, yeah, Neville Chamberlain's approach of appeasing them was definitely the right move in the hindsight?
No.
This shit is the stuff that centrists say because they can't have the fucking balls to take a moral stand when there's a real threat to society on the line. They'd rather hop behind a principle that makes them morally invocable than they would take an actual stand.
Here's what you need to convince me of, that there's a real fascist threat to society.
I don't need to convince you of anything.
Okay, well, if you can't convince me that there's a real fascist threat, then I'm not going to say it's acceptable to use violence because I don't believe there's a real fascist threat.
You don't have to permit it. You just have to get out of the way when it happens.
No, I don't.
Then you'll get hurt? Why would you not want to get out of the way?
No, me and the rest of civil society will stop you from doing violence.
So yeah, you were going to team up with the Nazis to halt radical
centrists always side with Nazis.
Yeah. So
exactly, centrists are not scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds.
Okay, all right. Now we're getting a little off topic here. I want to really quick retreat all the way back to the global wave. Now, I feel like that global wave stopped as soon as Le Pen lost the election. I feel like that steam died. Now, the movement has not. The movement definitely has not. However, I feel like
it's going to be worse in France's next election cycle because, like, nobody likes Macron, and he's just keeping the status quo, which is giving fuel to the fire of fascism. Macron was like the status quo that we accepted to avoid getting the Le Pen.
All we needed, I feel, was a Band-Aid until this got fixed. Because when is the next French election? Can someone really quick remind me? Is it
2022?
2022, perfect. That would be all the time that we need to stomp this out. Now, granted, like, we're assuming, I'm assuming at the very least, that Trump does not get a second term. That immediately takes away the head of the demon. We do not have to worry about the French election because the steam, the engine has been stopped. Like, it's lost a wheel. Like the car.
Do you think that is really Trump, or do you think that this is really, like, I don't know, my personal opinion from what I've seen is that this is really Putin's agenda that he's pushing forth throughout the Western world so that Russia can rise to power, and then he's funding Le Pen, he's funding Trump. I mean, which we don't have, like, confirmation with Trump. We do have confirmation with Le Pen and some of these other parties that he's aligned himself with. Do you think that Russia is behind this movement in Western Europe right now?
I think Russia benefits from the destabilization of Western society.
Really quick, there was one person who said, I think, did they say they vehemently disagree with the statement I put forth, or was it they agree? I
probably disagree. I always find myself arguing with centrists. Look, as far as I'm concerned, we all have an ethical obligation to stand up against movements which pose a threat to our society. And
no, I do.
Whether you believe... sorry, but I think, and I hope you guys think, that Nazis pose a greater threat to our society than leftists who are aiming on preventing Nazis from taking over society.
I agree. The thing that centrists don't see eye to eye, like myself and leftists, is how dire the situation looks. Because to you guys, it looks like it is impending.
I agree. That as the person who's being maligned as a centrist, even though I'm clearly not, I see it as a non-dire threat.
Isn't this exactly what happened in Nazi Germany? Like, nobody thought, like, oh, the Nazis are here.
And that right there It's the cost.
So real quick before
wanna...
we get off track.
No. Okay, a world war. You know, the next world war will be settled with nukes, right? World wars are not the cost of free society. If a free society means we have to put up with a world war every 60 years, I don't want to live in a free society. I want to live in a free society where I can jerk off to my anime porn and browse memes on my phone, and that's all the freedom I need. All the rest of the freedom, if it leads to nuclear war, is not some shit I need to be a part of, okay?
I think you're getting a little bit into extremism, because I don't think anyone... I think everyone, even to the most uninformed, retarded, like, citizen, can realize, hey, a world war would probably kill literally everyone I know and everyone I love. I would rather avoid that at all costs. I think if it really came down to that, everyone would avoid war. Because they do, like, we would be in more of a Cold War situation than an actual world war.
Even the fascists?
Yeah, but the problem is wars
I think even the fascists, because they'd realize that their selfish gains would be destroyed in the process.
Yeah, I'm not taking that bet. Okay, look, I'm not a political scientist.
So
you would be... That's true, isn't that the worst option, though? Because a Cold War in a fascist society, they would just execute their agenda on their own.
It's still unclear to me why we see fascism as a dire threat, given that there are literally no meaningful fascist countries right now.
Wait, real quick, before you do that, can I respond to some things?
The idea is that the U.S. is currently becoming a fascist country, which I inherently disagree with.
Much of Europe as well has movements of their own.
Wait, I don't believe that, though. I don't believe that America is becoming a fascist country. I believe America always inherently was fascist, and that its inherent characteristics are just coming to the surface a little bit more prominent. I don't think that America's suddenly going to turn into a fascist state and the concentration camps are going to spring up on the coasts. What I think is going to happen, or what I think is currently happening, is a subtle and omnipresent delegitimization of existing political discourse, a deprivation of economic resources that we had become accustomed to in the post-war period, and a lack of faith in reasonable discourse as an opportunity to resolve political disagreements. All of those things together, when you toss them in with an already fairly disenfranchised white lower middle class in this country, can lead to some very, very, very fucking tense political situations. And whether or not that turns into a fascist dictatorship is largely irrelevant, because it has the potential to. And the potential for the world's largest nation to turn into a fascist state, it far outweighs the moral sacrifice to beating up a few Nazis.
I don't think beating up a few Nazis is going to prevent it, though.
The underlying civil structure of America prevents this country from turning into a fascist dictatorship.
Our institutions are being eroded and delegitimized by the day.
No, they are not.
Constantly.
Yes, they
Wake up if you don't think they are.
Yeah, you're
look at the past, look at the past 10 months.
Okay. Our presidency
if the nation wanted to be fascist, we'd turn fascist. The nation would do it. I mean, our structure is set up to where we can change the structure to then be fascist.
But wait. Our structure is absolutely not set up that way. Under what circumstances?
It's literally written that if you want to change the Constitution, you can vote to change the Constitution.
Yeah, with the process that is literally almost
Supreme Court as well.
The process of changing the Constitution, the possibility of changing the Constitution without a supermajority of citizens agreeing with it is incredibly difficult.
And you just do one
yes, and thus it makes it possible if you have that majority of people.
Okay, but we're civil society. That's not going to happen.
All right. So I feel like this has become a large argument of the simple concepts. Simple concepts of optimism versus pessimism. We're no longer. I don't think we're any longer looking at parts of the political spectrum as much as we are like counting the days to the end of days. Like we're identifying each other as how long it is until the world's over, if it's going to end. Which is kind of ridiculous.
You're entirely off on a tangent. The statement that was made was that the United States. The statement that was made was that the United States is vulnerable to fascist takeover because we could rewrite the Constitution.
We're misunderstanding the base of the argument, though.
Okay.
See, what I'm saying
crazy.
Same.
Okay, wait. Yeah, so what I've kind of, like, this conversation has kind of devolved to the point where it's, the world isn't going to end, the world is going to end, the world isn't going to end, the world is going to end.
Okay,
And it's
right.
kind of
So if anyone who's arguing the world is going to end is arguing a substantial change in the structure of the world, it's on them to show me the process by which the world ends. It's not on me to say the world isn't going to end, here's my evidence.
Okay.
The world hasn't ended in the past. It's unlikely to end in the future.
Okay, I have a limited tolerance for this meandering nitpick. Here's the fallacy. Prove your argument to me.
Literally, you're saying I'm meandering. You are saying I'm meandering.
Yes,
we're saying we don't need
someone
you.
who's generally agreeing with some of your points, you do that. You have very bad debate habits that are actually very annoying to deal with, and this is not me personally attacking you. It's just an observation as someone who mostly agrees with with most of what you're saying. You definitely don't go about it the right way, and it definitely triggers other people.
I don't give a fuck if you're triggered.
Wow.
Okay, then.
First of all, I came here to have a good.
So anyway, let's move on to something relevant.
Yeah, so I want to address two things real quick. I've been trying to do this for a while now, so we're a bit far away from the topics, but I think I still remember. So first of all, the cutting off the head of the snake argument of, like, if Trump doesn't get a second election, do you think that, like, Western Europe and stuff is going to get better? And as a European, I'd say no, not really, because before Trump was even a thing, like, the nationalistic tendencies in Western Europe have been blowing up. So I don't think there's going to be any difference there whatsoever.
Are we talking about in relevance to Brexit?
We were talking about when, like...
Oh, no, I know
to make this point was Le Pen.
About, like, the negative portions, like the nationalists.
So, for example, sure that, but more so that general, like, you know how, what the fuck is that group called? The EDU, Europe Defense Force, whatever they're called, EDF?
Yeah.
EDL, yeah, that's in England though. I think EDF is in Germany.
Para something, isn't there? The one, the Occident or something.
Yeah, but the cunts, the movements like that are really popular from like 2012 and onwards.
Also,
and like
the
even before that.
Hungarian government and currently in Poland, it's pretty ultra nationalist.
Yeah, Denmark also definitely shifted way far right. We had one of, like, normally, so our government is made up, so there's a lot of parties that all get, like, a decent amount of votes. So our most popular party will get about 37% of the votes, which is a lot higher than all the other ones. For the first time ever, our, like, most racist, they're just straight up racist. They used to have, like, a directly racist platform back in the 2000s before political correctness. But they got like 47 or something like that % of the votes, which is one of the highest swing votes of any year ever.
Wait, what? So, you're saying the Danish People's Party got 47% of the vote?
Danish People's Party? Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
They did not get 47% of the vote.
Something like that. Hold on.
They got 23% of the vote.
That's still a rather large party.
Well, hold on.
They got the highest percentage.
23 and 47.
Hold
are
on,
nowhere near each other.
That is.
Hey, I don't mean to take dominance over this discussion yet again, but I am going to have to go soon, and I'm not really the leader of it. But would it be okay if I made a closing point?
Sure thing. Sure.
I think that pretty much every reasonable political scientist and every reasonable assessment of the current political climate suggests that there is something unique and scary happening now in regards to the political situation we find ourselves with. This is noteworthy, and I do not know for sure whether or not this political climate will end in a scenario which is apocalyptic or even one which is tremendously devastating. But I believe, and I think there is reasonable evidence to suggest, that there is a good threat of either of those cases becoming reality. And with that in mind, with the knowledge, or at least the strong and well-reasoned opinion, that there is a strong threat of societal upheaval, of the dissolution of our democratic institutions, and of the uprising of fascist groups in this country, on this planet, I think it is not at all unreasonable to suggest the use of violence. And we're not talking thrown up against the walls and shot here, guys. We're talking about throwing around some force at protests, which is something they already do. I do not think it is in any way undemocratic or antithetical to the principles of a free nation to suggest those tactics. And if the cost of living in a free society is the potential for world war every time neo-Nazis come in vogue again, then that's not a society that I want to live in. And if there are any people out there that would rather stay centrist and tackle leftists for daring to challenge the system that is eroding than the Nazis who are eroding the system, then those people should be lined up against the wall and shot. Because they, more than anyone, will be responsible for the calamity that comes after them. A sentiment echoed by Martin Luther King, who, and I will not quote the entire thing, said that he found by far the greatest opposition to progress was not the Ku Klux Klaner or the white nation's counselor, but instead the white moderate. Anyway, with that, thank you all very much for your time, and I guess I'll be back tomorrow. Have a wonderful night.
Right.
PM me if you want to chat.
Alright. Fun talking with you, man. I really quick want to, before everyone else just fucks off, I want to just kind of, I feel like we have kind of hit an ideological standstill of whether the centrists in the chat or in the
I don't know why people substantially left of center are centrists.
Alright.
Okay, non-radicalized.
Okay,
thank you.
Non-radicalized, I'm sorry.
Pro-cap.
Those who are non-radicalized feel that we are in the apex. We're living in the apex currently. And those who are radicalized feel that we're only at the start, and this is just the beginning. I feel like that's just a very standard ideological difference that I don't think we can solve with one, like, how many hours has it been? 4-hour debate session?
I think it's pretty simple. If things were accelerating and there were no pushback from civil society to the far right, then I'd be like, oh, this isn't working right. But the fact of the matter is, the large percentage of society has pushed back.
I think that's a fair statement. I don't, like, a lot of people definitely in the chat did not, at least, just, now that you've calmed down a bit, it's glad to hear just your initial ideas, but that is actually a very good point to make there.
Society is not saying, oh, it's very important that we allow the Nazis to march. They're saying, wow, this is violence. Violence is gross. I hate all violence. And
I think people are dumb and need to have things explained to them.
And look, I am
not you all.
far happier. I am far happier with Antifa than any of the neo-Nazis. I think, in a hot second, but they are unhelpful and they are wrong.
I think if you really want to oppose violence in all its forms, the only ideologically and philosophically consistent thing that you can hold to be true is anarchist pacifism. If you truly oppose all kinds of violence.
I do not oppose violence in all forms. I don't oppose violence in all forms.
I think what he is essentially trying to say is that I just blanked. Okay. I think what he's trying to make the point of is that the pushback that we are seeing is good enough to show that we're not collapsing under a fascist dictatorship. We're not in an unbelievable... the comparison to Nazi Germany really triggered me a little bit because we were not in a horrifying economic... we're not currently in a horrifying economic depression where we're looking to anything. I'm just saying, where we're looking for anything for hope. Literally any possibility of leadership and we did have that to a lesser extent last election, definitely not to a state of Hitler just because of the way that he spoke compared to the way that Donald Trump speaks. We're looking at more of just a slight resurgence, in my opinion, and this is where a lot of us differ, than a full-out revival of fascism. I feel like we're looking at a slight resurgence compared to a revival of actual fascism, that we haven't reached the lowest low that the actual Nazis got to in order to start the World War. If we do hit that low, if we did hit that low, and it did resurge to the extent of what we're at now, then I would be scared. However, because it was sort of a small dip, not a depression, a recession, and then a small upswing into this slight uprising, I am not as worried as I probably should be. Or as everyone seems to think that I should be.
Well, so if we look back in Nazi Germany, power was seized. And I think that's what people are afraid of, is that the ability to take control of the government is there, and to supersede the Constitution and like all the laws and rules that we have currently in place. I think that's what's frightening to people.
The idea is that it's always been there, but it's only been for extremely drastic measures to be changed. I don't think in the current state of the administration that there's any way that Trump, every bill that Trump has made that has been considered far right has been shot down and contested to the ends of the earth.
But they're sowing the seeds with repealing DACA. And they're sowing the seeds. They're creating this other.
That's the real reason that the problem is there. I think it's that they've been really completely ignoring any sort of rules that apply to them at all times, like the annulment clause and everything. There's no
rules have they ignored?
Well, the annulment clause is one of them.
Okay.
Right?
Can you? I understand the annulment clause. Can you describe it?
The annulment clause is that someone that has been elected shouldn't be able to benefit from their own. They shouldn't be allowed to personally and financially benefit from their office.
Okay. Is that a really big deal?
Yeah, actually, I think it is.
So you believe, just so I understand, you believe that Trump, who is already undoubtedly a billionaire, is siphoning off literally hundreds, maybe
it's in the Constitution. You care about maintaining your institutions and having full faith and confidence in them. You need to abide by them.
The annulment clause is an irrelevant thing.
That's not
it exists in the institution set that we have.
It's not even clear that he violated it.
Then take it to trial, and we'll see whether he is.
And people are attempting to press lawsuits against it. What's your point?
Which is reasonable. That is his point.
And none of those.
Absent impeachment, he is immune to being taken to trial for that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, what's your point?
You need impeachment to bring presidents to trial.
Yes, what's your point?
His entire point is that the annulment clause is being, well, do you know the purpose of the annulment clause?
It has nothing to do with the presidents, I'll promise you that.
It has nothing to do with them.
No.
I vehemently disagree with that statement.
So you believe we put in the annulment clause specifically so that presidents...
but it should not be, he is currently violating that regardless. It's just to a higher extent. One of the highest positions in the U.S. government is being violated, is violating one of the constitutional clauses.
Just so you understand.
Yes.
The annulment clause is literally saying that you cannot hold a title from another country, right? You get that? It's the titles of nobility clause.
That's the first part.
It also says that they can't accept presents, emoluments, office, or title. Now, I imagine getting into presents could be quite easily argued with how Trump has conducted his private businesses and used them, whether it be his hotels or his Mar-a-Lago dealings. He's using that to his advantage in matters of state.
Yeah, and it's disgusting, and to the extent that someone wants to impeach him about it, I imagine he'll get impeached about it.
Okay,
but that was the entire point that we're making.
That is the breach of the annulment clause, so he would be framed.
No, I completely disagree.
So here's where this all falls apart: is that when you look at the current Congress, the Republicans aren't doing anything about it. They see that Trump is breaking these rules, but to them it's like, oh, our guy's in office, it doesn't matter. He's untouchable, and that's the problem when you let anything slide.
It's not a problem. That's intentional.
How is allowing people to flagrantly violate the rules intentional?
The idea behind the presidency was that the impeachment was a political act. It's clear in the Federalist Papers that impeachment was always supposed to be a political act.
Okay, so let's say, for example, the Republican Party decided to act fascistly. There are no way to get rid of the president then, because it's a political
for another 3 years. That's correct.
If they decide to act in a fascist manner, they can just not do the election.
No,
exactly.
That they can't do.
Yes, they can. They can amend the Constitution.
No,
and then they can amend it.
They can just bypass the Constitution if they have control of the government.
So what you're talking
in such
about,
a dominant manner.
So to get from what you're saying about the annulments clause, which is where the Republican Congress has chosen not to impeach the president, to what you're now talking about, which is where the Republicans somehow declared that there will be no election, you understand that one doesn't follow from the other, right?
No, what I'm saying is that the principle is that the government doesn't want to obey the government's rules.
No, the government is obeying the government's rules.
It is
not. The impeachment of a president is a political act. It was
Could
made
you
clear.
Describe the source in our codified law or underlying foundational documents, not in some opinion papers, which are relevant for understanding theory, but not for the de jure, like things we're trying to talk about here. Like, describe a source in our legal fiction, like all of our legal structure, not theoretical papers, which leads to show that so I'm sort of mumbling here.
Yeah, Federalist 47.
Okay, could you show us where Federalist Paper 47 is enshrined in our law?
The Federalist Papers are the foundational documents behind our Constitution.
They are not law. They are philosophical papers, discussions.
Right.
They are important for understanding, but they have no legal bearing or basis.
So
they are not part of our rules.
From a legal bearing or basis perspective, unless the president is impeached, he cannot be tried. So from that perspective, he has not been impeached. He cannot be tried. That's the foundation.
And refusing to impeach,
violation
of rule,
is not against the law
of our institutions.
It's not against the law whatsoever. It's completely in the bounds of the law. It's completely in the bounds of the law to choose not to impeach someone.
You're not following the issue.
You're saying that from one perspective, from one perspective, you're saying you can't show me where in the legal documents it says that that this is a political act.
All right, I'd like
dude. And then on the other side,
hilarious pedant. You don't listen to anything.
Let's say you have hundreds of laws.
There's actually zero point in talking to you. I'm out. Bye. Everyone else though, you guys were cool. Have a great night.
Good night.
Then you have hundreds of laws that apply to the president that are supposed to restrict how he's supposed to act. Then, if the Congress just decides not to act upon them, he has no restrictions whatsoever.
So give me an example of what you think, how you think that would work.
How do you mean, sorry?
Well, so the example that was given so far was the president has people stay at his country clubs and still owns the post and still has the lease to the post office building, and so he's violating this irrelevant clause of the Constitution, and he should be impeached for it.
Relevant clause of the Constitution.
Irrelevant.
Why would you say it's irrelevant?
Because it has nothing to do with what it literally has nothing to do with it. But let's move on past that and give me an example of something where he could actually impact the way the government works and nothing could be done to stop it.
The point isn't that nothing can be done, it's that nothing will be done, and that degrades.
So give me an example of where literally no one has the ability to stop him unless they're a Republican, other than impeachment. So what's he going to do that we can't stop through our civil society? What's the scenario that you're so terrified of?
I'm just acting as the devil's advocate.
Someone has to be scared of something more than he's making money from his post office.
Well, no, the idea. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm blanking. I'm watching the stream partially. The idea that they're probably arguing here is more or less that there's the chance for exploitation of making
There's
that
always
amount of
the
money.
chance for exploitation.
Sorry, a higher chance for exploitation because of his bending of the annulments clause.
Okay, but what they were saying was because he is bending the annulments clause, he's clearly going to cancel the elections.
No, it's not that he's trying to. It's that
you're acting
it could lead to it.
It's kind of annoying.
Okay. So I don't understand how it could possibly lead to it, given that canceling the elections, there's a private right to action. You can go to the courts. You can say he can't cancel the election.
Yeah, but then there's nothing to stop him from doing so. I'm not saying that he necessarily is.
There is,
but...
because if you go to the courts and you say, I'm sorry, the elections aren't canceled, the elections are in the Constitution, courts will say, you're right, the elections aren't canceled.
I guess the fear is that he'll perform some sort of like military coup and take over the government with the help of the military. Because I mean, you would need that. Like,
sure. If you believe that the United States is subject to a Trumpian military coup, canceling the elections and just declaring Trump dictator for life, then you believe that we are at the precipice of a fascist takeover. I'm not sure what changed over the last year to take us from where we were to this precipice, because I don't think anyone believed that if Obama had said, hey, we're having a coup, there will be no election, Donald Trump isn't allowed to win. I don't think anyone believed that that would have happened or lasted or sufficed.
That was actually like a really big meme on the right, especially in the Alex Jones thing. That was like that's a really big Alex Jones meme. He used to accuse Obama of, oh, he's gonna introduce a police state, hand over your guns. Justin Bieber, the globalist.
Sorry. Crazy people do believe crazy things all the time, and when they believe those things, you say they're crazy. You don't say, oh, well, you were crazy, but now that your side is in control, you weren't crazy, you were right. He was crazy then, and anyone who alleges that the current president is going to do it is crazy now.
Well, no, but so look at this. You could obviously see that there are a ton of uneducated, misinformed people, a lot of Trump voters. Like, if that's offensive, I apologize. But there are a lot of people who just don't take the time. They're single issue voters. They don't really care about doing any sort of research. They just can watch one campaign ad and they've chosen who they're going to vote for. Those are the people. I'm not saying that everyone is going to, because I think the majority of people, at least in the United States and worldwide, are good-natured people. They don't want to do harm to each other. But I think you can easily trick people by doing things that you've already started to do, like making this great big other.
I agree. Is he going to run for re-election, or is he just going to cancel the election?
Well, I would assume he'd run for re-election. I don't personally fear this, but I'm just trying to say this is what I think people are fearing. I don't think that's going to happen.
Fascists aren't elected in free and fair elections after the first one.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Sure. Okay, so I'm not politically knowledgeable at all, so I'm just trying to put out there what I think I was picking up from everyone else. Maybe to help myself, but so wasn't the scenario that was presented one that required a unified or majoral takeover of the government, like in such a way?
I have no idea what scenario. No one's been able to state a clear scenario where we're having this.
Right, but this is the scenario that I thought I was picking up that they were talking about before that initial guy left. I can't remember his name.
I think he was arguing for 3/4 of the states agreeing to amend the Constitution.
Right, but so isn't it possible?
No, it's not. So there's that.
Isn't it possible that they could have a majority in such a way that they could just defy the Constitution and no one could hold them accountable? I don't know.
Well, that was the entire point that was put forward, but that was a big hitch in the argument, was that to get to that sort of a majority requires so much to go wrong that I could not logically see that happening.
But I mean,
that was a big portion of the argument that I just couldn't get on board with. I could agree with him on some portions, but that was definitely a big negative point, was that while I do agree that there are portions of the alt-right that need to be handled, I could not see this immediate this sudden and immediate takeover that was being predicted by him.
So
it was very.
They're not giving enough sudden.
It is 2/3, by the way.
No, it's not. It's 2/3 of the Senate. 2/3 of the. It's 2/3 of the Senate, 2/3 of the House, and 3/4 of the state.
I'm pretty sure.
You're absolutely wrong.
Okay, well, let me try and pull a source for you.
String theory. Do you know the difference between? Do you know the difference between specifically our government and what would be required for fascist takeover and what would have been required in, say, Germany?
I have no idea.
Okay, so because it seems pretty complicated to me, like, because you present it as if it's not possible, but these things have happened before, right? So
they have.
So what's to say that they can't happen again?
It's not the idea that they can. It's the probability is so unlikely that he's making the argument that it's not even worth it.
Right, but isn't even a slight chance?
There's always a slight
very
chance.
Dangerous?
There's a slight chance that you walk outside and you die from a meteor. Like, that's what he's saying, is that the chance is so slight.
If I die from a meteor, it's one person.